Sometimes I feel in worship, I'm not saying there's not a place for this, but sometimes in worship we are driven by our feelings. And so we don't really give much account to what we're singing. And so for worship to have an impact on our hearts the way I believe God intended, a praise service, praising the Lord, lifting up worship to Him, we got to actually probably think about what we're singing instead of just singing the words and not even know what words you're singing. How many of you have ever ridden in the car and you're singing a song and now you're old enough, you're of age, this is a song you've sang your whole life, and then all of a sudden you started paying attention to what you were singing and you were like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I want to sing that so much. Because a lot of times in life, we are driven by our feelings. And we can actually have and know and words be in there, and we can recall words and sing them and not even know what we're singing. I feel like much of the time, that's what our worship looks like on Sunday morning. Because we would rather chase a feeling than actually have a thought. We live in a generation where people have been inundated by media to such the magnitude that we don't even think critically anymore. And to be a believer in Christ, so much of what happens, particularly in regards to spiritual warfare, happens between your ears. And I'm afraid that space is becoming increasingly empty in our American culture. If you want to know what an airhead is, I would say an airhead is not someone who doesn't have a thought, but it's someone who's never formulated a thought on their own. Meaning that there are many things we think that are not our thoughts. There are many opinions that we have formulated and we regurgitate and we share and we are passionate about that we have not really truly even thought through whether we truly agree with it. Many of us will repost on Facebook an article, something that's got you stirred up into a tizzy without ever reading the article. I would say probably 99% of the people who post articles are actually posting an article because someone else said that the article said something and it sounded like the title said it, and it got you mad, and so you post it and you don't even know it came from a spoof site that wasn't even real. You know why? Because we're airheads. And we don't want to formulate a thought of our own. I know, just welcome to Sunday morning at Echo Church where you get insulted. I'm just saying, like, it's a real problem. This is not for the sake of insulting people in our fellowship. It's for the sake of waking us up and getting us to a point where we can live the kind of life that God's called us to live. If you're going to be a Christian, you cannot be a Christian without a thought of your own. And I'll say this, particularly in our culture today, and I think it's very important. If you're going to be a believer today, and who's not going to formulate a thought on your own, you're probably going to be, listen, a heretic. Because we'll very easily in this culture, if you lived here any amount of time and you've heard anything, gospel preached, people talking about the Lord, much of what is being preached from platforms across America is not biblical. And so be careful, little children, what you hear. And be careful when you hear it, you actually think about it and you go look it up. Okay? Don't let your life be like a Facebook profile where you merely post things that you haven't thought out. Live a life that you haven't processed. And so it's things like this. Let me give you an example. So today we sang a really wonderful song that many of us really love. We say things like, God, show us your glory. I think that's an exciting song. That's a fun song to sing. Just so you know, once He opens Himself up and shows His glory, you die. You cannot even see the glory of God pass. I think the only person in the Bible who actually saw a glimpse of God's glory was Moses, and they hit him in a cleft of the rock, and he saw the backside of His glory. and he didn't die, but he had to cram him in the middle of a rock. So I don't even know what that does, but he put him in a cleft of a rock to show him the backside of his glory. And we're crying out on Sunday morning to see his glory. Do you know that when you think of that, when we sing that song in American culture, what we're thinking is, I want to be rich, I want to be blessed, I want to be healed, I want everything to go good, I want to have everything that I want, show me your glory. But the song, if you're crying out biblically, is show me your glory so that I can die and no longer live, and only you live in me. That's what that song means. So that's thinking critically. And so it's very easy. So when we come in, and this is a little bit of teaching, when we come in and we sing on Sunday morning, let's sing with something in between our ears. Let's sing with a thought. Let's consider the Word of God. Because if we only come and lift up worship through feelings, we are missing out on what Sunday morning is all about. This is an opportunity on Sunday morning for you to formulate a thought of your own, to think critically about His Word, to not merely cry out of the passions for your heart for something for you, but consider how your life may be sacrificed to such a measure that His life might actually reign through you. That's the point of the gospel. So when we think today in 1 Samuel chapter 14 of Saul, when we think of his life, when we think of the fact that here is a man who not only was a powerful leader and started off well, but he was handsome. It said of him he was tall and he was extremely good looking. He had a lot going on for him, if you will. He was powerful. He was awesome in battle. But when we think of Saul, we should think of this. Lots of people can start well, but very few end well. Are you with me? So becoming a believer in Christ, how many of you remember the day that you gave your life to Christ? You remember that day? If you would look over the years, and there are people who have stayed the course. They're marathon runners, if you will. They run the 15th mile as fast as they did the first mile. Those people exist in the kingdom. But can you look back at when you first came to Christ, and can you look years later and see that there has been a diminishing effect to how hard you chase the Lord? We see this in many people's lives. We see it all through the Bible. It is easy, people, to start well. It is quite another thing to end well. And in the life of Saul, we see a man who is after God's heart. We see a man who listens to God and inclines his ears to God. We also see a man who then becomes increasingly corrupted by money. Hello, America. And power. And begins to get to the place where he considers and thinks that people are there to serve him, and he is no longer there to serve the people. It changes the very aspect and the way that he lives. Listen, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but I certainly can. There are times that I think my kids are there to serve me, my wife is there to serve me, my employees are there to serve me, the church is there to serve me, my friends are there to serve me. Let me ask you a question. If you would evaluate your life, is much of your life about positioning yourself to be served? And if so, maybe we can learn from Saul and be pricked in the heart and realize that just like Jesus came to serve, once we're then caught up in him through belief, and he is in us, that our life then is held ransom to us serving others. All right? That's the gospel. The gospel is about what you get. You get Christ. It's not about the tangible things you get. I'm sorry, you can disagree with me all day long. That's not the point of the gospel. It's about the intangible things. It's about Christ. Will you get tangible things? Maybe, and maybe not. But the point is this: having Christ should be all you ever need. Not Christ and. Okay. Today, I don't just like come up here and try to figure out how to offend people. Like, that's not my thing. But I think the older I get, the more I can reflect on my life, even 5 years ago, and I can see how self-centered I was and still am. And you cannot be self-centered and God-centered at the same time. You can't be. So then if you can see in your life areas where you're self-centered, you need to be honest enough to say, I'm not God-centered in those areas. And that, let me tell you, me included, when I look at my life over this week, that's concerning. Because He should be enough. It's concerning. I saw this tweet, and listen, I am thankful for our independence here in America. I'm thankful for it. I am, to some degree, I'm becoming less and less. I am excited about what this nation stands for, what it stood for. I'm concerned about what it's standing for now. But we still are blessed at this point. There are some certain principles that we have established since the foundation of our nation, that it is in God that we trust. That has allowed us to enter into some form of blessing. We are a blessed nation because we have put God as, even on our money, we put that in Him we trust. I'm afraid that we don't trust in Him so much anymore. So at the same time that we shoot off fireworks and we eat hot dogs and we hang out today, and I'm going to be doing that, probably going to have more than one hot dog. I'm getting brats because that's God's holy hot dog, right? Like, it's good. I'm going to have that. I'm going to barbecue that. It's going to be fun. We're going to shoot off fireworks, and we're going to celebrate the independence that we have, right? We're going to celebrate everything that this nation stands for. We're going to celebrate the sacrifices that men and women have made for this nation. We're going to celebrate the fact that we, at this time, are still a blessed nation. But we're also then going to, I personally am going to consider, what is my responsibility? Not the government, not the president, not the military. What is my responsibility to make sure that I am just as much in love with God? I am more in love with God than I am this nation. Okay. Here's a tweet that bothered me. Some of you are like, just get off Twitter, Sean. I know. I can't help myself. Like, here's one. Dear Pastor, God and country is not a sin. I don't agree with that. Because God doesn't say, love me with some of your heart and then the nation with the other part of your heart. Love God and love your country with some of your heart and love me with some of your heart. It says love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. If this day is worshiping on Sunday morning at the throne of God and then going to your barbecue grill and worshiping your nation, you're getting it wrong. You don't have to agree with me, and you may think that I'm not a patriot or whatever. I'm just saying something that I think is important. God doesn't give allowances, God plus something. It's God is my everything. Okay. I'll tell you something. If a believer loves God with all his, there's a reason why God says, love me with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then love your neighbor as yourself. He's not saying divide your love. He's saying, if you love me with all your heart, soul, and mind, and strength, and I am your everything, you will naturally show love to your neighbor. Okay? So he has to become everything if we're going to honor the nation the way that God intended. Okay? It's really important. I'm not trying to be a downer today, but let me tell you something. Divided love has done all kinds of horrible atrocities in the world in which we live. I love Brooke very much, and the way I love her matters. And I'm not going to go love someone else the way I love Brooke. Are you with me? I think that's enough said. I think at least, if you could theologically disagree with me, maybe you could make some valid points. This is not something I'm just concerned. Today concerns me because I believe this nation has more loyalty from us as believers than God does. During the election, so many horrible things and positive things were shared about the people running for office that it consumed the walls on Facebook, our news channels, our Twitter pages, everything. It consumed it. People were in our church getting mad and saying horrible things online. I'll tell you why. Because many people love the nation more than they do God. Because some of the things that are shared during these times where we try to celebrate our nation is not the love of Christ at all. And listen, when our nation becomes more of a priority than God, then we become hateful, vindictive, horrible, mean, no good, very bad people. All right? Kind of like Saul, who in one moment loves God and the next minute loves himself. Come on now, listen to me. You're like, what's that got to do with loving God and loving the nation? What do you think this nation's made up of? Ourself. Listen to me. Listen to the connection. Loving God and loving yourself is a problem. It creates a divided, listen, I'll say this the simplest way I can. It diminishes how you start. There are many people who come to life in Christ and we start well and we chase Him. But then as we do battle in life, we end up loving ourselves, and it changes how we lead our homes. It changed how Saul led a nation, and it changed how we lead our homes. It changed how Saul led a nation, and it changed how we lead our employees at work. Because we love ourselves, and the efforts we started with are diminished by our love for ourselves. Be careful today that this day is not a celebration of you, but it is a celebration of God. Okay, that's what I want to read. Let me read this. 1 Samuel 14, 38 through 52. I'm going to just read straight through this. And I know we read the whole chapter last week. I feel like this is what I want to talk about today, so let's get in here. And Saul said, "Come here, all you leaders of the people, and know and see how the sin has arisen today." And Saul said, so this is a good thing, Saul noticed that sin was causing a problem. Let me ask you a question. Do you notice when sin causes a problem in your life? So as we judge Saul today for his attitudes, his behaviors, and all of these things, at least consider this, that he can notice when sin is causing a problem in the life of his nation, right? Notice that all of this is attached to sin in the nation is causing a problem in the nation. Notice that he doesn't connect it to himself. It's amazing to today that all of us and most of us could say our nation has some problems, but very few of us could go, I'm part of the problem. Listen to this. This is crazy this landed on the 4th of July. Listen to me today. This is very interesting. Verse 39, "For as the Lord lives who saves Israel through it, be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die." So if the sin is in Jonathan, he's going to die. But there was not a man among all the people who would answer him. They were protecting Jonathan. If you don't know what happened last week, go back and watch the sermon or reread the whole chapter. I don't have time for that. Verse 40. Then he said to all Israel, you shall be on my side, and I and Jonathan, my son, will be on one side. He's trying to figure out who the problem lies with, whose sin, where the sin lies. And the people said to Saul, do what seems good to you. See, now he's developed this attitude in the people that they're no longer going to do what seems good to God. But now they're going to do what seems good to him. Let me ask you a question. Who you voted for in the presidency, I'm not making an issue of that, whatever. I'm making an issue of the fact that are you more concerned about him doing what seems good to him or about God for this nation doing what he seems good to him? Have you, much like the people here in this nation who have given themselves over to Saul doing what seems good to him, are you the same way? Do you fight more for someone to do what they want, or do you fight for God to do what he wants for the nation? This is good. 41, therefore Saul said, O Lord, God of Israel, why have you not answered your servant this day? God is silent. Have you ever experienced that? It's probably because you haven't done the last thing he asked you to do. So you're praying for him to either do something or speak up again, but he's like, I already told you what to do 20 years ago. You still hadn't done that one thing I asked you to do. So why don't you do that, and then maybe I'll tell you something else. You want to hear me talk? Be obedient. Okay? That's good. If this guilt is on me or in Jonathan my son, O Lord, God of Israel, give us Urim. But if the guilt is on the people of Israel, give Thummim. And Jonathan and Saul were taken, but the people escaped. So now he knows the sin is either between him or Jonathan. Then Saul said, cast lots between me and my son Jonathan. And Jonathan was taken. Other translations say the sin was then rest upon Jonathan. Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. What in the world, kid? And Jonathan told him, I tasted a little honey with the tip of my staff that was in my hand. Here I am. I guess I'll have to die. I sense sarcasm in this. I ate a little honey. Now I got to die. You know what I think's funny? Is that Saul calls this problem making oaths when he should have been making battle. So Jonathan's probably a little sassy about it. I'm sorry, kids get sassy in case you didn't know. If you would have been more busy going to battle like you were supposed to, by the way, I was in battle. I got up earlier before everybody. I made the whole Philistine army run away with me and my armor bearer. I was going into battle when you were laying around making stupid oaths. So now I guess I got to die because I've been faithful and you've been making oaths. I feel like that's what it is. And if it's not, oh well. And maybe if I'm reading into the attitude, oh well. From my understanding of it, I feel like he's like, this is ridiculous. And Saul said, go do so to me, and more also, you shall surely die, Jonathan. There's sarcasm backfiring on you, right? Because he's like, yep, you need to die. Didn't work. Then the people said to Saul, shall Jonathan die? Who has worked this great salvation of Israel? Far from it. As the Lord lives, there shall not one hair on his head fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day. So the people ransomed Jonathan so that he did not die. Then Saul went up from punishing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. Now listen to this. When Saul had taken the kingship over Israel, he fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, against Ammonites, against Edom, against the king of Zobah, against the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he routed them, and he did valiantly and struck the Amalekites and delivered Israel out of the hands of those who plundered them. Now the sons of Saul were Jonathan, Ishvi, and Malchishua. Malchishua, some people say. And the names of the two daughters were these. The name of the firstborn was Merab, and the name of the younger was Michal. And the name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz. And the name of the commander of his army was Abner, the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. Abner was his cousin. Now it starts naming. Listen, how many of you right there, you just tuned out because I started reading names. You're like, blah, 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 blah. Charlie Brown, right? Teacher. This is saying something. Not because of what the names mean, but because of who is being named. Listen. Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner was the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. There was hard fighting against the Philistines all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he attacked him to himself. It goes on to read, as you read the duration of Samuel, that Saul was very successful on the field of battle. I'm going to jump ahead here for just a moment of my notes. I'm going to get all discombobulated in my notes because I feel like this is the place to interject this right now, right? And you know I don't really give a rip about my notes anyway, right? You can be successful in a public forum, and you can be a failure in your private life. Listen, all the days of Saul's life, he was successful on the field of battle. And this was a pivotal moment because God now lifts his hands off of Saul as the one sent by God, ordained by God. God lifts his hands off him. And Saul, without God's blessing on his life anymore, still wins battles on the field. So let me say something that will blow your mind and frustrate you into a tizzy today. Many great, good things have been done without God. Be careful to not align God's blessing on someone's life just merely with how it looks in a public forum. Because just as God can bless a life and we see successes in life, so can the devil. The greatest way the enemy attacked is not by getting you to reject God, but by getting you to think that what you do is in his name when it is actually in Satan's name. He's not so dumb to try to get you to go from point A to point Z. He will try to get you to go from point A to point B because you still think B is on this side of the alphabet, the good side. And he will slowly move you into a place where you are doing good in a public forum and it seems like you're winning, so you will think that God still has his hand on you. But I want you to know, I believe today worship is happening all across the nation. And it's not about the church, it's not about a denomination. I say in every single church there is worship going up across the nation where people falsely think that what they're doing is for God and they don't know that they're no longer working with God. God has left the building and they don't even know it. And that's the concern. I believe much like us, Saul is at a place that he sees he's still winning, and so he thinks that there's no need to turn his heart to God. He doesn't even notice that his heart has gotten far from God. He doesn't even notice that he's running different than the day he started when God blessed him as the king of the nation. How many of you have ever been like that? Like you see the sins in everyone else, but incapable to see the sin in yourself. Come on now. Be very careful that you don't become someone who is angry at the church because the church is horrible and the church hurt you, because you're part of the church and you're part of the problem. We all are. Right? Where can you go and not be hurt? Where can you go and not be rejected? Where can you go and always win and never be hurt? Only into the arms of Jesus. That's it. That's it. Not into the arms of your nation, not in the arms of being a patriot, not into the arms of the military, not into the arms of your president. You was only not in, listen, let's take it out of there because that's just getting too, It gets me mad. Not into the arms of your wife, your kids, your husband. Who did it name here? Mothers, fathers, grandparents, uncles, cousins. Isn't it amazing that you can lead a whole nation and not even lead your family? Isn't it amazing that you can get to a place where you can fight for the lives of your whole nation, but call for your kid to be killed? Guys, if ever this sermon was relevant, it is relevant on the 4th of July. Because some of us have fought harder for our nation than we have for our God. Some of us have fought, let me say that again, because I kind of said it really fast and pulled it back because I was scared to say it. Some of us have fought harder for our nation than we have fought for God. You watch today. You watch how many likes, how many comments, how many reposts are on pictures of a flag. And then you watch somebody quote something from the Bible and see how many likes, reposts, and appreciation is shown in that. I'll tell you why. Because we love God on the altar we love the nation on the altar of God. We have sacrificed God on the altar of our nation. You want to know where people's hearts are? Look at what they celebrate. I'm not saying not to be happy about the nation you live in. I'm proud to be an American. But I'm more proud to be a son of God. And let me tell you, my Facebook posts are going to show it, and that ain't just because I'm a pastor. And in case you didn't know, there have been many years I have not been a pastor. I've been working full-time jobs as a steelworker or making puppets. I went to the steelworker because after I made puppets, I didn't feel like a man anymore. So I went to be a steelworker just to kind of balance it out. And so I just want you to know, I've been it all. I've worked in construction, I've made puppets, I take baths, and then I go out and mow and snort and spit and stuff, just so I can just balance it all out. Right? That doesn't really, what does that have to do with anything? I don't know. I have an internal conflict going on. Am I a real man? I don't know. I'm like David. I can tear bears apart and lions apart, but then I can also sit on the back of a mountain and write poems and sing love sonnets to God. Because being a man is not snorting and spitting and being tough only. Being a man is also being loving and kind and gentle and being able to shed a tear on Toy Story. You know it's true. You're watching Toy Story, you're like, what, we got flowers in here or something? No, you're a man who cries. Go take a bath. What in the world? Okay, listen, I really think this is important. Your knowledge of the Bible is not indicative of your belief in it. And your belief in it is not a mere proclamation with your words. It is a proclamation with your life. You can tell me you believe all day long, but it says in Revelations that one day people will stand before Him and say, I believe, I have believed, I still believe. And He'll say, depart from me, I never knew you, because your belief was not real. Because belief in words alone is not necessarily belief. Belief has to move beyond words into a life submitted to the Lordship of Jesus Christ. Okay? This is important because we are so, in this nation, we are so interested in celebrating our independence that when then God says, I must be your Lord and you must be my slave, bond slave, you chose to submit your life to me in complete service and servitude. I am your Lord. You do nothing without me first saying it. You say nothing without me first saying you can say it. That this type of life runs in the face of our nation. So we fight for independence. We have barbecues and go to the lake celebrating our independence. But then when we consider Christ, know that you don't have any. You're like, well, what about free will? You have free will. And then once you're saved, it ain't about your free will no more. Because now you're a new creation and you move out of free will into servitude with Him. We preached the gospel and we've called it grace, and we said that you can live submitted to the lordship of Christ and do whatever you want and you'll still be saved. I just want you to know, if you're saved, truly saved, you will actually submit your life to Christ and not just live as a free moral agent all by yourself. You won't do it. John talks about it. If you're questioning me right now, go to 1 John, 2 John. You read those, then get back with me. And this is the disciple that Jesus loved, that inclined on Jesus' chest. You understand what I'm saying? So I think it's very important for us to understand that what God calls us to, listen, is belief, but belief is not merely a proclamation. It is a profession with our life. Okay. All right. What we see in the collapse of Saul should point us to the triumph of Jesus. Here's what the Living Bible says. I'm quoting this. It's in the same portion that we read. And I like this translation. And I'm not saying it's a good, I like this version. It says this, "Then Saul said to the leaders, 'Something's wrong.' The fact that God had not answered him, he attributes to a problem with sin. He recognizes this correctly. What he is not good at is recognizing that it is his sin that's caused the problem. You see, often the problem is in the leader. Listen to me today. You produce what you are. You disciple people like you. You develop who you are. You don't like what's around you? Take a good look at yourself. I have a pastor friend of mine who was talking about his church and said, we don't have a generous church. We have a very ungiving church. I don't even know if we're going to have a church because we don't have a generous church. And I asked him what he does with his generosity. And he wasn't very generous. We don't need to talk about specifics on that. And I want you to understand something. You get what you are. You draw what you are. And the best way that you can take inventory of the sin in your life is two things. Look at what makes you the maddest, because you're that incognito, and you just don't know it. And look at the people you have around you, because you draw what you are. Now, are there nominal outliers here? Absolutely. Well, because most people around me, they seem to be like me, but this one person. I'm not saying that's 100% proof. I'm just saying generally we tend to hang around people. And here's another thing. I've read this. I don't know if this is true. I don't think anybody knows if this is true, but you seem to be the sum total or average of whatever you hang around. So let me tell you, if you look at who you're hanging around and you don't like what you see, maybe you should add some new people to your circle who challenge you and make you better than you are today. If you look at your circle and you go, I don't know that these people, sorry, I'm really hot up here. I don't know that these people will help me become who I need to become because they're not that themselves, then maybe you need another circle. That's not fun because it's easy to get comfortable. Do you know that when Jesus came to the man that was at the pool of Bethesda, that people were broken off into porticos or different pillars, and they actually had sections. They put the lepers over here, they blind men over here. That's what the porticos mean. They would separate them so that one disease didn't infect another person with another disease. Are you with me? So all the people that were diseased with this one over here, all the people diseased with this would go over here. And I want you to understand something that I think is very, very important. Much like that story, we tend to hang around people that make us comfortable with our own disease. You develop what you are. 1 Samuel 14, 38 through 39. Something's wrong, Saul says. We must find out what sin was committed today. I vow by God. Let me say this. Some of you see some problems in your life. You see some stuff blowing up in your life. You see things going crazy in your life. You see stuff being destructive in your life. And you look and you go, must be that person, must be that issue, must be this, must be that I don't make enough money, must be that I grew up in a bad home, must be that my father left me, must be that my mom abandoned me, must be that I was raised in an orphanage. Must be this happened, this happened, this happened. I want you to know something I think is very, very, very important. Sometimes it's your sin that's causing it, not everyone else's. I read this week in the book, The Prodigal Church. I encourage you to read it. Jared, who is the writer in The Prodigal Church, says this: the way the church wins its people shapes its people. So the most effective way to turn your church into a collection of consumers and customers who make everything about them is to treat them like that's what they are. The Bible does not do that. We've done that because we want to make the church attractive. We wanted people to be happy instead of holy. And so we wonder then, when we look at the church today and we see that the nation needs believers in Christ, while we can only find consumers and people who are happy. When we look at the church, we see dispensation. There are not holy people. I'll tell you why. Is because we have developed the church into a machine that wants to make people happy and not holy. And when the nation needs the church the most, it can't do what it needs to be because we made the church what it is today by the choices we've made. This is Saul. I want you to know, men, you are the leader of your home, regardless of what your wife has had to step up and do because you won't do your job. God still sees you as the leader of your home. Men, you lead your home and you're responsible for your home, and God looks to you. Let me ask you this question. Did you start well when you had that newborn child? And how are you doing now when you come home from work? Men, don't punt on your responsibility to be the father in your home. Because if you're not the father, that kid will find one, and it may be in a gang. And it may be in a man that you don't want your daughter dating. She will look for affections that she could not find in you. And when you punt on your responsibility and you don't understand leadership shapes your children, you are much like Saul. You started well, but you got tired. Men, we cannot afford to get tired. Our children cannot afford for us to get tired. Women, do not think that your role is not important, and do not think that you are not also a leader in your home. You are. The way you talk about your husband in front of your children matters. Men, stop making your wife the butt of your jokes. What happened to opening the door? How many of you here today? How many of you still, there's going to be some hands, how many of you still open the door for your wife every time you go to the car? Men, raise your hand. Oh, no one. Is that because we're in the Midwest, or is that because you started well? And then she's too slow now. She carries too much stuff. And actually, if I walk her to the car, I got to carry the 20 bags she's carrying. Carry your own junk. This is personal. I'm venting. Yesterday, I went out from the car. We ate dinner in Lee Summit, went to the car, and I opened my door for my wife, and she looked at me like, it shouldn't be a shock. That should be normal. It's the way we teach our men in our homes, our young men, how to treat their wife. It's easy to start out in love. You don't fall out of love, you work your way out of it. Okay. Listen to this. I'm going to say this. Pass out. Then Saul said, cast the lot between me and Jonathan was taken. And I need to end this. This is not going the way that we thought it should. In 1 Samuel 14:43, then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. And Jonathan told him, I tasted a little honey at the tip of the staff was in my hand. And 14:45 says this, then the people said to Saul, shall Jonathan die, who's worked this great salvation in Israel? The people realized that the role of Jonathan had played in the salvation of the people, unlike Saul himself. The inference is that people recognized that John had been doing what Saul, as a king, should have been doing. Listen, there are predators out there that if they don't see you leading, they see that as an opportunity to become what you refuse to be. This is where affairs happen. Come on now, listen to me today. There are people out there that are looking, men, at your wives, and that they see you not doing your job, they will swoop in and do it for you. Are you with me today? They're opportunists. Let me tell you the best opportunist to ever live. Satan. We cannot afford to be slothful. The Bible talks about it. Do not be slothful. Do not be the kind of person that you are so tired and so lazy that when you put your hand in a bowl, you can't even lift it up to take a bite. You know what that makes me think of? Put your hand in a bowl, you can't even lift up to take a bite. That's, whenever they went out to gather manna in the field, it said that they put their hand and they scooped up manna and they put it in the bowl. Are you with me? They would go out with bowls, enough for the day. God would rain down manna for them to be able to survive in the desert. They would go and they would scoop up the manna and they would put their hand in the bowl. And this is what we've done today in our nation and in the churches, is that we have gathered up manna and we put our hand in the bowl at salvation and we never bring it to eat anymore. And it is the bread of life. And you should be feasting on it daily. Don't be so lazy that you put your hand in the bowl and can't put it up. Anyway, because it's easy to start well. It's easy to gather. It's quite another thing to lift your hand to your mouth. I got to be done. Thank you, Landon. I'm sorry, buddy. Let me say this. So what are we to learn from this story? A bunch of things, but let me give you the main thing is this. You can look successful in the public forum, but you can be a failure in your private life. So we are to learn from this history, from this story of Saul and his people, that there is no hope that man can offer. That a lot of times men will start well and they will end poorly. Until we met a man. The people in the Bible said, what manner of man is this? What manner of man is this that begins and ends as well as he began? This story of sadness, this picture of lack of hope, points us to Christ, who is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He is our priest, He is our prophet, and He is our King. And He not only began well, but He ended well. He brings us hope in the middle of unfaithful, selfish leadership. Listen to this. Jesus is the answer. Listen to this. I'm going to end with this. I'm not exactly sure how it goes in there, but I think I've got to talk about this before I jump back into Hebrews. I was in a class. I'm almost done, Landon. I love you. I was in a class this week, and so I was reading 2 books. And can I make a recommendation? Will you write this down? I want you to get these books and read it. And if you don't read it, please listen to them, because I want you to get an idea where my heart is. It'll help you understand what the heck I'm doing up here. There's 2 books. One is by Andy Stanley. I admire Andy Stanley, and I think we are to respect both of these people, right? They have very different approaches, but they all hold high truth and grace in Christ. They both hold high that, right? One is Andy Stanley, and it's Deep and Wide. Another one's Jared Wilson, and it's The Prodigal Church. Read those 2. One's a very consumer-driven church, and one's a mission church. It's saying that we need to return back. The church needs to prodigal. It's went away. It needs to return back to what God originally intended the church to be. Both of these make valid points. I think it would be good for you to read the dueling conversation between these 2 books, although they're not even referencing each other, and they both respect each other. Listen to me. I think you need to read this as a church so you know where we're going. I'm just trying to help you. So that's that. In writing a paper for one of these, I'm going to summarize this because it was a long paper, like 20 pages, right? So writing a paper for one of these, somebody said this, and they were quoting Galatians and Corinthians. They were quoting it, but not actually quoting it. They were referencing it, saying they were quoting it, but it wasn't a quote. And they were saying that basically the law, that you cannot be justified by the law. How many of you know that to be true? We cannot be justified by the law. Raise your hand, right? That we can only be justified through Christ. So that was accurate. But they went on to say this: the law revealed their need for justification. That's true. While being insufficient to provide such justification. That's true, but there's some underlying, careful. Therefore, in order to be justified by Christ, here's where they went wrong. I was reviewing this. They had to acknowledge the insufficiency of the law and their need for justification. Listen. As we read writers in Hebrews, as we move on to Hebrews here in a few weeks, as we read writers in Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews, and he references the law, be careful to not think that the law is inadequate. You cannot be justified by the law. You can only be justified by Christ. Let me tell you why you can't be justified by the law. It's because there will be no man that has not sinned and fallen short of the glory of God except for Jesus. That's why we have to be justified by Jesus. But let me tell you this. So I had this argument in the class, and it went this way. And it was a great debate. That there is an attitude in the church today that the law is insufficient to accomplish justification. Right. Okay? There's truth in that to some degree. But if that's entirely true, that the law is inadequate, if the law is inadequate, then Jesus wouldn't have had to obey it before he died and resurrected from the grave. So what we can't do is we can't diminish the beauty of the law. The law in and of itself is perfect, and it is pure, and it is not broken. We're broken, so we don't obey it. If there would be a man who could obey the law, could he be justified by the law? Yes. But is there, and as there ever, and will there ever be a man who will obey it completely? Only one. His name is Jesus. That's why now in the earth we are justified through Jesus. But it doesn't mean the law is a failure. It doesn't mean that the law is wrong and it's not inefficient and it is not good and we should not consider it. There are things in the law, it is pure and it is true. And if you would follow it, it would help you.